The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, it's Budget Day in Ontario, and we've got complete coverage of what you'll pay in taxes and the breaks you're eligible for. We'll hear from Minister of Finance Peter Bethlenfalvy, then get reaction from the opposition parties. And finally, John Michael McGrath and yours truly will be joined by the Trillium's Jessica Smith-Cross for a special budget edition of onpoli. That's all ahead on the agenda. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. Without further ado, let's get you some highlights from this year's 2025-2026 financial update for the province of Ontario. Sheldon, graphics if you would, as we go through what the economic growth projections are for the province of Ontario. Last year, clocking in at 1.5% growth. This year, down 0.8%. And then next year, they expect it only to rise to 1%. What do we spend most of our money on? Well, of course, healthcare. That's always the number one item in a provincial budget. $91 billion for healthcare, followed by number two, education at $41 billion. Social services comes in at number three, but the number four item in the budget is interest on the debt, $16.2 billion. If you add up these three categories plus everything else we spend money on, it comes out to $232.5 billion in this year's budget. Now, of course, we don't bring in enough taxes to pay for all that, so we're going to run deficits. We did last year to the tune of $6 billion. This fiscal year, the projection is to really explode, more than double, $14.6 billion of a net cash requirement for this fiscal year, coming down the following year to $7.8 billion, and the projection is for a balanced budget in 2027-28. Tariffs, trade, and Trump. Yes, there will be protections in this budget for all of the above. A $5 billion Protect Ontario account in which there will be liquidity relief and job protection for businesses. How about critical minerals? We hear a lot about that, particularly in Northern Ontario. The budget puts $500 million into a critical minerals processing fund to ensure that minerals are not just mined here, but processed in the province as well. There's an Indigenous Opportunities Financing Program, $3 billion for loan guarantees to help Indigenous groups develop energy projects, pipelines, mining, and resource developments. As always with Ford budgets, there are affordability measures. That temporary cut in the gas tax is now permanent and should save families $115 a year. There are also going to be no tolls on the east end of Highway 407. That's the part of the highway the province still owns. And they estimate that'll save commuters, daily commuters, $7,200 a year. Now, what about our sins? The LCBO, this is interesting, you don't see this. In 2023-24, the province took in more than $2.5 billion from liquor and booze revenues, but it's going down. Last year, $2.16 billion. And next year, they anticipate even less, $1.85 billion. Got to ask the treasurer about that. And if you like a little doobie-doobie-doo, the Ontario Cannabis Store is also showing revenues are down. Last year, $244 million in revenue. This year, they anticipate $215 million in revenue. Again, a loss from the year before. So that's some of what's in budget 2025-26 for the province of Ontario. Now let's hear from the man whose name is on the cover of that budget. Joining us from the Frost Block at Queen's Park, Peter Bethlenfalvy, Ontario's Minister of Finance and the MPP for Pickering, Uxbridge. And Treasurer, as I welcome you back to our program for your annual visit here, let me note that the growth rates that you are anticipating for the next couple of years don't show us going into a recession, but they're not all that buoyant either. So let's start there. How confident are you Ontario is not going to have a recession this year or next?
Well, first off, great to be with you again, Steve, and on the show. Look, those are private sector forecasts. We go out and get their opinions on the market and where they expect the growth to be. But look, I'm confident in Ontario's ability to deal with any sort of challenges, some of them external, like the tariff policy from south of the border, and position ourselves to combat those challenges. We've got some $30 billion of relief for these tariff response. I think we've got a really good vision and plan for long-term economic growth. So I don't know what's around the corner, but I know that Ontario is very well positioned to deal with for whatever is around the corner.
Last year at this time when we spoke, you were anticipating a deficit for this fiscal year of $4.6 billion. Today you reported it's going to be $14.6 billion. What's happened?
Well, I think the tariff policy is affecting economies right around the world. I mean, we're seeing that firsthand. There's a lot of uncertainty in markets and capital investment. So this is the reason that you have a strong balance sheet. As you know, I've been very fiscally focused over my 7 years in government, and we strengthened our balance sheet. We've got 2 credit rating upgrades, the best debt metrics we've seen in a long time. And this allows us to respond and meet the moment. This is not the time to take your foot off the pedal of infrastructure spend and investing in healthcare. But we can't have record investments and sustain world-class services without a strong and prosperous economy. So that our budget today was very much focused on our vision for how we're going to build this economy, make it the most competitive in the G7, because the tariffs, if anything, are a wake-up call. The status quo is no longer an option.
Let's zero in on a few items in particular here, and I want to start with post-secondary education. As you well know, that sector is really going through some tough times. There are colleges that are shutting down campuses. There are institutions that are laying off people, that are canceling programs. And I note in the budget today, you are proposing to spend less going forward than you are today or yesterday. Why?
Well, so first off, the way the accounting works, their colleges are consolidated on our balance sheet. It's the federal government that controls the amount of foreign students, and clearly by putting a cap on foreign students, that is decreasing the revenues, but also decreasing the expenditures. So they kind of go in parallel. The second thing is, colleges and universities have to make adjustments like everybody does in the real world, and they're going through that. Thirdly, we're supporting them. We announced last year 1.3 billion supports. And just a few weeks ago, fourthly, we announced 750 million to increase and fund 20,500 science, technology, engineering, and math positions at colleges and universities. And we're supporting them through the Ontario Research Grant with another 300 million. So working together, we can't control what the federal government does with the amount of students, but we certainly can work, and we'll continue to work with the colleges and universities.
What you do have control over is the tuition freeze you imposed 7 years ago. Why don't you take it off and let them realize some more revenue?
Well, we campaigned, in fact, campaigned in the recent election that we would keep them frozen to make it more affordable for people to afford an education. And you would know that the other parties said the same thing. So we have at least one thing we're unanimous on, that making it more affordable to get a world-class education is a strategy that we all support.
Let me ask you about booze, because one of the constants of the Ontario budget, as I remember them going back many, many years, is that the province always realizes about $2.5 billion from the LCBO. And I note going forward, revenues are going to go down between $400 and $700 million. And I never thought I'd see that happen. What's going on there?
Well, the first thing is the taxes and markups that, frankly, the previous government put on the industry were very injurious to the industry. And I'll give you an example. The craft beer taxes, there are 8 times, we inherited, are 8 times higher here than in Alberta. So we've today announced the biggest cut in taxes for example, microbrewers, craft beer producers in the history of Ontario. We reduced taxes and markups for spirits produced here in Ontario. We continue to provide supports for the wine sector. We cut the wine tax by 6.1%, all very much supported by the industry so that they can compete and with a level playing field, that they can continue to invest in hiring people and growing their product lines and providing some fairness to the industry. So that's having an impact on the revenues for sure. We also see consumption in some sectors going down. And of course, there are other factors. But, this is all about putting more money back in the pockets of businesses so they can grow in the alcohol sector, and also making it more cost-effective, keeping prices low for consumers.
I also note there's going to be $30 million less revenue for the Ontario cannabis stores next year. Are you guys at the ministry not smoking enough dope this year, or what's the problem?
No, I don't think that's the reason. We've grown, it's about $250 million from starting from virtually zero a number of years ago. So they've done a good job. There's investments that we have to make in technology and infrastructure, and we continue. We're very committed to the Ontario Cannabis Store footprint. The goal there is to combat the illegal market. We've made tremendous progress at the same time, and we're going to keep reinvesting that money so we can keep combating the illegal market.
You know that my approach in these interviews over the years is not to, beat you up for the decisions that you make. It's to find out why you make the decisions you make. And so I want to ask you about the choice of tax cuts in this budget. You've proposed, I think by my count, about $5.5 billion worth of tax cuts over the next 3 years, but ironically, not the tax cut that Doug Ford campaigned on 7 years ago and still has not fulfilled, which was the significant income tax cut that he ran on. So how come?
Well, we decided to do tax cuts a different way. We decided to do the effective tax cut, like the gas tax cut we announced in 2022. We made it permanent today. We're proposing to make it permanent. That provided immediate relief. And you go back to 2022, the cost of living and affordability. We thought that this was a quicker way to put money in people's pockets. We've done the same, for example, in transit fares and through the one integrated fare. That's saving the regular consumer commuter some $1,600 a year. We dropped the tolls on the 407 East and proposing to, and that's going to save the commuter who uses that to go back and forth from work $7,200 a year. These are immediate, not down the road filing a tax rebates to consumers and to businesses. I had a guy the other day here at Queen's Park scream out at me, "Minister, you're saving me $4,000 for my 407 East traffic because I come from Markham. I'm taking my kids to the Pickering hockey rink and the Oshawa hockey rink. I have to use the 407 to keep moving, and you're saving me about $4,000 a year." That's a really effective tax cut in my mind.
Okay. You would be very disappointed if I did not ask you about the hobby horse I raise every year, so here it comes. Your government spent $5.9 billion last year subsidizing people's electricity bills, and you propose in this budget to jump that to $6.4 billion. Now, Treasurer, I ask you this every year. You and I make six-figure salaries, and the province of Ontario is helping to subsidize our electricity bills. Why?
Yeah, you're right. I would be very disappointed if you didn't raise it again, Steve. So I'm ready for you. No, first off, the $6.4 billion, just for clarity, about half of it is for businesses and a half of it is for residences. And the business portion, some $3 billion plus or minus, is also like tax relief for businesses to stimulate investment and capital, particularly at a time that capital is uncertain right now what the impact of these tariffs are going to have. So I think that's good policy. And in terms of consumer relief, the other half, this is not a time to increase costs on consumers, regardless of how much they make. This is for everybody, and we're committed to continue with this policy.
Okay. As you know, you have a new federal counterpart now, François-Philippe Champagne. How well do you know him?
Extremely well. In fact, we talked quite a lot. We talked a lot through the election. We've talked for years. I've known him for a long time. We talked this morning. He's a very energetic guy who has got a great grasp of economic policy, and I think we're going to continue to have a great relationship. And I will say, Prime Minister Carney and his team, I've known Mark Carney for a long time. A very capable person, and we rely heavily on them with regard to the tariff negotiations. So we're going to have a Team Canada approach. We said we'd work regardless of stripe with anybody to advance Ontario's interests and Canada's interests. And let me give you an example of that. Canada Free Trade. You know who Canada's #1 trading partner should be? Canada. No. Canadian Free Trade, and our Premier and our team, Vic Fideli and others, are leading the charge that we're taking down all the barriers here in Ontario. We've got Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and yesterday Manitoba to join us. And Prime Minister Carney and his team have signaled that they're going to be doing this by July 1st. Chrystia Freeland, who I've also worked with very closely, has committed to do everything they can to do this by July 1st. And, let's all lock arms and boost our economy right here in Canada.
Just out of curiosity, you and Monsieur Champagne are both Quebecers. What language do you speak in when you talk to him?
It's a combination, Steve. You know, we really switched back and forth this morning. It was like half English, half French. His French is very good, I must say, and his English is very good. And so we do have great conversations. I'll tell you one quick story. A couple years ago, I was holidaying, in, as I do, in Quebec and in the summer in the Gaspé, and at a place called Capitaine Homard. Now, I may have had a bit of a beard growing. He just popped in for a bite, and I was there, and there's a finance minister. He was the industry head at that point, and we had a great conversation in the middle of the Gaspé, just about three of us in a restaurant of 20 tables. So he's a guy who's going to get a lot of things done, and we're going to work together on the nation-building type projects. This is where I think we can really seize the moment, the public support to get the pipelines, to get the Ring of Fire, to get our nuclear capabilities. You know, this is our time to really have the fortitude to make those big investments that will lead to economic prosperity, good paying jobs, go up the value chain for years to come.
As you know, I always like to finish off our interviews on a bit of a personal note, and I note this year that you dedicated this budget to your, I think, 95-year-old father now. Why'd you do that?
Well, you know, I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, in fact, last fall, I think it was Labor Day, I was in Halifax, and we went to the museum there, the Immigration Museum, and I said, do you have any records on Nicholas Bethlen Falvey coming to this country? And sure enough, they found that he arrived in May of 1951 as a displaced person, as a woodworker. And so, you know, he came to this country with absolutely nothing, Steve. That's the story of many Canadians. And this country gave him the opportunity to raise a family, to get a good job. He worked at Alcan. That's how I grew up in Montreal. And in one generation, have a finance minister in the family. This is the type of thing that I think is the Canadian dream. This is what binds us as a country. I think we live in the greatest country on the planet. And I'm so proud of my father. And I want to celebrate the hardships he faced. He left when he was 19 years old because of World War II. And he never saw his parents again, and he didn't go back to his home till the Iron Curtain fell in 1990. So, yeah, it was a bit sentimental for me, and thank you for raising it. If not people like my dad, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be giving back to this great country.
That's a very nice story, and we hope his health is good at age 95 and that you two have many more years together. Thank you for coming on to TVO tonight. We always appreciate your annual visits here.
Me too, Steve, and I think this may be our last budget together on the agenda. I want to thank you for the legacy of your body of work on the agenda over the years. It was quite remarkable, so thank you.
Well, you and I are about the same age, and I don't think you're slowing down, and I'm not going to either. I suspect this may not be the last one for us, so stay tuned.
Oh, there you go. Well, here, breaking news, Steve Paikin. No, I know you're going to do a lot of other things you're continuing on, but I just, on this show, and yeah, hopefully we'll do more together. And I just wanted to thank you for what you've done so far and what you're going to be doing.
Very kind of you, Treasurer. Thanks again.
Thank you, Stephen.
Now, let's get the opposition's take on this budget, and we welcome from the official opposition, Chandra Pasma, the NDP Poverty, Homelessness Reduction and Education Critic, the MPP for Ottawa West Nepean. For the Liberals, it's Stephanie Bowman, their Finance, Jobs and the Economy Critic, and the MPP for Don Valley West. And Green Party leader Mike Schreiner is here, and he is the member of the provincial legislature for Guelph. Great to see you three here tonight with us. I'm deputizing you all as headline writers for a newspaper. So you've read the budget, you've heard what the Minister of Finance had to say. Chandra, what's the headline?
This is a budget that really misses the mark. People need help. The budget gave them cuts. The government has completely thrown the towel in on housing. And if I'm a worker who's lost my job or worried about losing my job in Windsor or Oshawa, this budget does not make me feel any better.
That's a long headline for one newspaper front page, but okay.
I'm a lengthy writer, yes.
Okay. Stephanie.
My headline would be, Doug Ford puts his Captain Canada cape in the closet, counts on Captain Carney to save the day.
Okay. Mike Schreiner.
Ford budget leaves everyday people behind by failing to address housing, healthcare, education, and protect the people and places we love.
Okay, you both mentioned housing, so let's start with that. What do you think this budget doesn't do that should have done on housing?
Well, it doesn't really do anything. housing starts are the lowest they've been since 1955. It's never been more difficult for people to afford a home in Ontario. And instead of a change in direction, what we see is that the government is actually cutting funding to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. We needed to see some steps that would actually get homes built, some investments in affordable housing, some relief for renters. Instead, the government is blaming Trump and his tariff temper tantrum when they've had 7 years and they've delivered nothing on housing.
Stephanie, on housing?
Yeah, I mean, look, once again, this government is failing the people of Ontario on housing. They committed to build 1.5 million homes. Their targets continue to drop, and so they look for other ways to try to puff up the numbers. But again, this budget shows housing starts will not meet the mark, will not make the housing crisis any better. And I think they've missed a huge opportunity here to do things like remove development charges that so many people have been calling for. We called for that in our election platform. Those kinds of things that would both stimulate demand and also create more affordable housing for those people who need it.
Mike Schreiner.
Yeah, I mean, this government is utterly failing to address the housing crisis. They promised 1.5 million homes. They need to do 150,000 a year. 70,000 starts this year, only half of what is needed. They are not going to meet their target, and the reason they're not going to meet their target is the Premier keeps saying no to the zoning changes, like for multiplexes and mid-rises, so we can quickly ramp up supply to build homes people can afford in the communities they know and love. The government for chronic homelessness, 81,000 people homeless in Ontario right now. Imagine that. They're only providing funding of half of what the Association of Municipalities of Ontario say we need to end chronic homelessness. And when it comes to deeply affordable nonprofit and co-op housing, completely missing in action, even though Scotiabank says we need to build 250,000 co-op and nonprofit houses over the next decade. Not in this budget at all.
Stephanie, let me follow up on your comment where you said he's put his Captain Canada cape away and he's depending on Mark Carney to save the day. What does that mean?
Yeah, well, his Protect Ontario account, he's calling, which I thought was an interesting moniker, is kind of a let's wait and see. Let's wait and see how it goes. Let's wait and see how the federal government comes to the aid of businesses who might be struggling, to workers who might be struggling, just like the federal government did during the pandemic. So, as opposed to actually saying, look, we are here to provide long-term funding and permanent things like tax relief to businesses and to individuals, this government is once again waiting for the federal government to bail them out.
There's $5 billion, Chandra, in that Protect Ontario account. I mean, that's real money, wouldn't you say?
It is real money, which is why it's all the more disappointing that there's no conditions attached to it. There's no restriction that this go to Ontario companies, no Ontario procurement strategy, but also no ironclad agreements that when this funding goes to a company, the jobs, the factories, the equipment will all stay here. We've already seen that this government has given money to companies that are either standing down production or are trying to ship equipment to the United States. It's workers who have put their bodies on the line to keep that equipment from going to the States. What we need to see is the government demanding that kind of commitment, that accountability, that taxpayer dollars are going to jobs here in Ontario and not to companies that are cutting and running and taking the equipment with them.
I want to ask you about post-secondary. Mike Schreiner, you've got a big post-secondary institution in the city of Guelph. The money for post-secondary is supposed to go down over the next couple of budgets. What do you make of that?
Yeah, $2 billion cut between now and 2028 for an education system that's already the lowest funded per capita of any province in the country.
And has been for 40 years.
It has been for a long time. It would take a $5 to $7 billion increase in funding just to get to the average. If you want to talk about how we tariff-proof Ontario, it's having the best trained workforce in the world. You're not going to get that when you cut post-secondary education. You want to talk about how we innovate and be competitive business-wise, bringing new products to market. It comes from the research that comes out of our colleges and universities. We're going to lose that. This is going to do significant damage to our economy, and I am shocked that the Ford government doesn't understand the connection to investment in education and jobs and economic growth.
I'll ask you about education because you're the critic for the official opposition. $56 million in this budget over 2 years to hire new public school teachers. You got to like that.
It's a drop in the bucket compared to what's needed, and obviously we don't have the details. You know, the funding that they've said is for new teachers is to hire, I think it's about 2,500 teachers. We have 40,000 teachers right now who are certified with the Ontario College of Teachers who are choosing not to work in our education system because of the conditions, because class sizes are too large, because there's mental health challenges that are not being supported, because there's no action on violence that's occurring because kids are frustrated. If we were tackling those conditions, it would benefit our kids. It would bring qualified teachers and education workers, because we have a shortage of those too, back into our system. It would mean that our kids were getting the supports that we needed, and it would create good jobs. But this government, this budget is not closing the gap on funding that was created by this government's cuts and by the Liberal government before them.
Stephanie, the last Ontario election was clearly fought on Trump and tariffs and trade, and so was the last federal election for that matter. And this budget also focuses a lot on those issues as well. How concerned are you that other things that we really can't take our eye off of, homelessness, mental health, healthcare, a whole long range of things, are getting lost in the shuffle because governments feel they necessarily have to focus on the tariff issue?
No, it's a great question, Steve. This government has left Ontario's economy and Ontarians woefully unprepared to face this crisis. The government has been spending at a rate higher than inflation, 1.5 times the rate of inflation on average for the last 7 years. They were overspending and under-delivering. Again, we've had crises in healthcare, in homelessness, in housing, mental health. Every file is on fire. And yet, we have now got a government, because they've got their hands tied behind their back, is now got to only increase spending by less than inflation. So we're actually having a real decrease in real dollars in program spending, and that's going to hurt the people of Ontario. As Mike and Chasm were talking about, the post-secondary education sector, we are actually, two research groups, Ontario Council of Universities and another government body, are saying we're going to be short hundreds of thousands of spots in the next couple of decades. That means, again, we are not investing in our kids' future. And those kids, those students, are the workers of tomorrow who will be innovating, bringing new technologies to bear on our economy. That hurts productivity. And so those are the kind of things that, again, I think this government is failing the people, the budget and the government are failing the people of Ontario.
Having said that, I appreciate that opposition politicians usually like the government to spend more on their priorities. I get that. The deficit, Mike Schreiner, is booming this year. It's going from an already big number to a gargantuan $14.6 billion. The debt to GDP ratio is going up closer to 40%, which is a number we don't want to get back to. Conservatives would tell you this is not a very conservative approach to budgeting. What do you say?
You know what I find infuriating about this whole conversation is the Ford government wasted revenue on election gimmicks in the last two elections. 2022 $200 license sticker gimmick cost the province $2.5 billion year one, $1.5 to $2 billion each and every year after that. This election in February, $200 checks went out to people, including those who are millionaires, billionaires, and who get six-figure incomes, $3.2 billion. Imagine if we had all that money right now to invest in affordable housing, to fixing healthcare, to reversing the cuts to education. And your pet peeve, Steve, we're spending $6.5 billion subsidizing electricity prices for millionaires, billionaires, and people who have six-figure incomes. Why not cap that, target it to lower income folks, and redirect the money to higher priorities, housing, healthcare, education?
Well, I'll ask Chandra about that, because they are proud of the fact that they are going to make permanent the gas tax cut that they brought in originally, temporarily, we were told, but now it's going to be permanent once they pass it through the legislature. It's going to cost the Treasury $1.2 billion every year. What do you think they should be doing with that money, presumably instead of gas tax cuts?
Well, this is a government that always seems to miss the forest for the trees. The largest item in people's budget that they're struggling with the most is the cost of housing. There's nothing in here to help them with the cost of housing. People are struggling to afford groceries. There's nothing in here to help them buy groceries. If we really wanted to take action to make life more affordable, those are two areas where we should be starting, making sure that people can afford a home and making sure that people can afford to put food on the table.
Let me give 30 seconds to each of you just finally tonight. I appreciate you have criticisms with this budget. Tell me one thing you would have done that they didn't do that were you in charge would have been in the budget. Mike Schreiner.
Money for affordable housing. If we don't start building co-op nonprofit housing, we are not going to solve this crisis. 93% of the deeply affordable homes built in Ontario were built before 1995. 30 years of underinvestment has led to this crisis. We have to reverse it.
Stephanie Bowman.
Middle income tax cuts. Families are suffering from the affordability crisis. They need money in their pockets now. And contrary to what the finance minister said, doing that would put money in their pockets today. And a small business tax cut. Those small businesses create 60% of Ontario private sector jobs, and they're hurting. We don't want their doors to close because that will just exacerbate the unemployment crisis this government has created. Second highest unemployment rate in the country under this government.
Chandra Pasma.
Investing in healthcare and schools is a win-win. We are building the infrastructure, creating those construction jobs. We're hiring healthcare workers and education workers. Those are also good jobs. And we are providing people with the healthcare that they need and the high-quality education that their kids deserve.
Mr. Director, can I get a three-shot of our guests, please, as I thank Chandra Pasma and Stephanie Bowman and Mike Schreiner for coming into TVO tonight and participating in our budget night coverage. Many thanks to the three of you.
Steve, thanks for your service
stop
at
it, Mike.
TVO.
Okay,
Thanks,
Steve. Thank you.
Congratulations.
I'd love to talk to you more, but I got to go over there and talk to these guys over here, which I'm going to try to do right now, and you guys can sneak out. Anyway, I have to say, a little overdressed for the onpoli podcast. So, Ian, you want to hang on to that? There we go. I'm going to come over in here and join my buddy JMM, John Michael McGrath, and Jessica Smith-Cross is here from the Trillium. And of course, we don't do suits and ties here. We do T-shirts right on this. So here we go. This is, and I'm going to ask you guys, why have I got Premier Leslie Frost on me today? Okay, you guys are all very sharp. Why am I wearing a Leslie Frost T-shirt today? Who knows?
You didn't tell me there was going to be a test.
No, I didn't tell you. I
Live on the
wanted to
air.
surprise you with this one. I wanted to surprise you. Hold the thought. Hold the thought. Because we got to do a little business here off the top. I'll give you guys a little extra time to think about this. For the audience at home watching or listening to this the day after the budget, we should tell you that we are doing this live at TVO the day the budget was delivered. So we're going to do something a little different here, and we are integrating the agenda and our podcast. So with that, welcome everyone to the onpoli podcast. I'm Steve Paikin.
And I'm John Michael McGrath.
I'm Jessica Smith-Cross, the editor-in-chief of the Trillium.
And tonight on the pod, it is Budget Day in the province of Ontario, so here comes a special edition of onpoli.
It's Thursday, May 15th, 2025, so let's get to it.
Okay, so now we return to my shirt. I got Leslie Frost on here. Can you guys see this all right? Anyway, Leslie Frost, who was Premier of Ontario from 1949 to 1961. And the question is, why am I wearing a T-shirt with Les Frost on it? And the answer is, come on, guys, you know this. Where were we today?
Oh, the Frost
There was a
building.
frost.
We were in the Frost Block, which is where the Ministry of Finance is. And do you know why they've named the Ministry of Finance after Leslie Frost? You will not believe this. This is kind of crazy. Leslie Frost, when he was Premier of Ontario, was also the Minister of Finance of Ontario / Treasurer at the same time for about 6 years. Can you imagine that? He was Premier and his own Finance Minister at the same time for about 6 years. So this being Budget Day, I got Leslie Frost on. Does that
you
make
go.
sense?
That makes sense.
Okay, perfect. Now, where are we? We got to talk about the budget here, right? Okay, so let's get to it here. We have been wondering what kind of budget this would be, given the economic circumstances that the province of Ontario finds itself in. We had some decent economic growth going, and then along came Trump's tariffs and the ensuing trade war, and we don't know what is going to take place down the road in terms of slower economic growth or job losses. So let's get into it. Where does Ontario stand today?
Right. So Ontario has delivered a $232.5 billion budget that will run deeper than forecasted deficits in the near and midterm. The government had predicted that it would see a deficit of $9.8 billion for 2024-25. That has been lowered to $6 billion, but other fiscal periods are a different story. The deficit that had been projected for this year of 2025-26 that was going to be $4.6 billion will in fact be $14.6 billion. So a $10 billion increase in the deficit. $7.8 billion deficit for 2026-27. That's up from a projected surplus of $500 million. And by 2027-28, they are predicting an even smaller surplus of $200 million. So these deficits, the budget is quick to explain, are due to elevated economic uncertainty from tariffs and threats to Canadian sovereignty. The province is positioning this as a budget focused on protecting jobs given the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs. To that end, they announced details of the Protecting Ontario account, which is a $5 billion fund that Ontario businesses can use if they have exhausted available funding. How that fund will be accessed by businesses is a little ambiguous right now. They have announced other measures to this end, including an increased tax credit for businesses and a deferral of certain provincially administered taxes, as well as WSIB rebates. Now, Jessica, you had some economists, both of whom are fans of the podcast, if I recall. You had some writing for the Trillium. What are they saying?
Yeah, we kind of hoarded the brain power in the press gallery today, if I could say so. So we had Brian Lewis, who's a former province's chief economist, and we had Peter Weltman, who's the province's former financial accountability officer. They both kind of tackled the same idea that, Steve, you were getting to off the top, the very unprecedented nature of these times that we find ourselves in, the economic storm clouds, Trump, tariffs. So Brian Lewis concluded that this budget was always going to be a balancing act for the government. It was going to have to deliver on campaign promises, navigate the economic storm clouds, and maintain some kind of fiscal discipline. And he finds that the province did a pretty good job of that. But he does note that this path back to balance that the province is projecting it's going to be on is very narrow. So it's projecting like lower than inflation spending increases in health care, which is it's not really been done of late, and almost flat education spending and increases coming up. So he knows that that's really hard, especially when there are already gaps in healthcare, like people who don't have a family doctor. Peter Weltman, on the other hand, took the view of whether this budget meets this moment of this unprecedented time. He sort of made the case that in an unprecedented moment like this one, you should do something bigger and bolder and not just sort of get through it, but go for it. It should really unleash itself. And I wanted to make a comment about this column that I really enjoyed that's maybe just for the really nerds like you. So Peter Weltman was the financial accountability officer. He had released these like huge detailed reports from the people in his office about something. We would ask Minister Bethlenfalvy about these reports. Minister Bethlenfalvy would say, well, that just sort of captures just a snapshot in time or a moment in time, and sort of dismiss the questions that we were asking about these reports. So Peter's column takes is this budget just a moment in time, or is it something a little bit more?
It's a little shot at the treasurer there.
Just a
Right?
dig.
Just a little dig. Just a little dig. Okay, you want to pick up on that?
You and I have enjoyed Mr. Weltman's wit on the podcast before. So I appreciate him being a little bit more liberated now that he's no longer an officer of the legislature. Do we want to talk portfolios here?
Yeah, talk portfolios. Okay, let's do, as we saw with the wrap-up I did earlier for the agenda, healthcare is always number one when it comes to budget spending. Education is always number two. Social services is always number three. Interest on the debt, number four. It's the fourth biggest line item, the interest on the debt. Okay, but housing, we want to talk housing here. Talk to us about what's going on in there.
Right, so there are two sides to this. For the budget, any budget will always mention housing starts, and that's because it's a really important economic indicator, right? If people are building lots of new homes, that is a good sign that the economy is booming, and if they are not building a lot of new homes, that's a bad sign, generally speaking. But of course, this government also has a housing target of 1.5 million new homes by 2031. So the fact that housing starts have in this budget been revised pretty sharply downwards is both a bad economic indicator and also a political problem for this government. They are moving further away from meeting their housing target, and they were already not looking great in terms of meeting that target. That said, the government is not sitting still. Earlier this week, the province introduced the Protect Ontario by Building Faster and Smarter Act, which I think is Bill 17. Two controversial changes from this act include reducing the ability of Ontario cities to impose inclusionary zoning rules. This is a power that had been first granted by the Wynne government, then was substantially constrained by the Ford government when they took office in 2018. It is now being constrained even further. There is an additional change. The government is basically saying that cities have no ability to impose building conditions on like new developments, new condos, above and beyond what the building code in Ontario already requires. Both of these changes are really going to bite hardest in Toronto, where we had both inclusionary zoning rules that were pretty substantial, and also Toronto had what was called the Green Building Standard. That both of those policies now seem to be more or less dead letters, for lack of a better word. Jessica, what did you see?
So in healthcare, the headlines, $91 billion overall, $1.8 billion for the Primary Care Action Plan. This is the one led by Dr. Jane Philpott to connect everybody with primary care, like a family doctor. There's $300 million over 4 years to expand primary care teaching clinics capacity, which is dedicated to training primary care doctors, and $280 million over 2 years to expand the integrated community health services centers. The name of them I always forget, but these you might recognize as the sort of new private clinics that the government is setting up. Right now, they do MRIs and CT scans, but the plan is to expand them to do endoscopies and orthopedic surgeries, though the government is way behind on their plans to do a call for proposals to get that up and running.
I'm going to admit something here. Endoscopies, what are they?
I think that's like an internal camera thing. I'm not a doctor.
I think it literally means like they put a scope into you.
That kind of stuff. So not a camera like we're talking to right now.
Not that big, though.
I really hope not.
Not that big. Okay. All right. So we've done housing. We've done healthcare.
Yeah.
You got to hit education here.
Yes. In education, $55.8 million is being spent over 2 years to train 2,600 new teachers by 2027. Base spending is also going to rise slightly from $39 billion this year to $41 billion by 2025-26 for elementary and secondary education.
Okay. And as we suggested earlier, the health is number one, education's number two, social services, child services, number three. What do you got on that, Jesse?
$20.4 billion. $16.2 billion will be spent on interest payments as well, as you highlighted earlier.
Wow. Okay. What about on infrastructure?
Right. The government has, we mentioned this on the agenda earlier, the government has made the cut to the gas tax permanent and removed tolls on the provincially owned part of Highway 407. That was, the government notes will save Ontarians about $100 a year, while the latter could save Ontarians who use that route daily very much more. That said, the gas tax cut will deprive the Treasury of about $1.3 billion, and removing those tolls, of course, will not benefit some drivers at all. Like if you're in Windsor and never take the 407, I mean, maybe this is a nice sentiment, but it doesn't benefit you anything.
Now, let's just remember, when they say they're cutting the gas tax, which will deprive the Treasury of $1.2 billion, $1.3 billion annually, that's annually.
Yes.
That's this year and next and for as far as the eye can see. And let's go off script and talk a little politics here, which is to say, if you gave an income tax cut, everybody would get that. If you're cutting the gas tax, only drivers are getting that.
Yes.
If you only take public transit, you're not going to realize that tax cut. Just as if, when they took the $200 off the license plate fees, you had to be a driver who gets a license plate in order to realize that tax cut.
And the bigger the car, the more you drive. It might be incentivizing some things that are not so good for the planet right now.
And the politics of this are, I would suggest, pretty obvious. downtown Toronto people tend to take, and downtown Ottawa people may very well take a lot more transit than they do driving. It's the 905 and the suburban belt ridings that do a lot more driving, and that's the home base of Ford Nation.
This is a very, very long story. You can go back to the 2010 mayoral election where Rob Ford won, and it was almost a perfect sort of one-to-one correlation as the rate of motor vehicle use went up in what were then the city's 44 wards. The share of people who voted for Rob Ford increased. It was almost like a perfect correlation. And you could. I haven't seen anybody do the exact analysis. I would not be at all surprised if we saw a similar relationship with Doug Ford as premier.
Right. Okay. This budget, we read it all, right? 232
Sure did.
pages long. There are thousands upon thousands of numbers in there. So we want to go through, obviously not all of them. I'm really interested in the kind of the one or two numbers that just caught your eye and you thought, I'm nerdy enough to want to bring this to the onpoli table tonight. Okay, McGrath, go first.
Okay, so the province had announced in April that it would be providing colleges and universities with $750 million in funding for courses related to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Due to changes at the federal level for international students that we've heard about so much, Ontario's post-secondary schools are in a bit of a budgetary freefall right now, and there's just not that much else in this budget. In fact, post-secondary funding is scheduled to fall in the next 3 years. So the sector is not in love with that news. I just, before we went to air, I saw the Council of Universities has put out a release, and whenever a sector does these kinds of responses, they say very nice things about all the good news in the budget, and they finish the release with, all that said, we really would have loved more money. The two helicopters in Niagara and Windsor region I found interesting. This is the province really stepping into basically border patrol roles, not unheard of in the provincial level, but obviously something that the premier likes to talk about his role in what you might either think of as like a federal arena. Mm-hmm. And because we're this show and it is in the budget, I'm just going to mention the thing about the bike lanes.
Yes.
The government is basically reintroducing its law to remove the bike lanes in Toronto. The text of the budget bill came out after the minister's speech, and what it seems to be doing is basically, instead of giving the minister Minister of Transportation the power to remove bike lanes at his discretion, now it is using the law to command him to do so. This could be relevant in future court cases or even in the current court case, but we don't have the time to go into all of that right now.
Okay. Jesse, what did you like?
Well, if you ask me for a number, the number has got to be zip. Maybe I'm stretching your question a little bit. But the thing I wanted to talk about was the special economic zones. They're mentioned in the budget, but I learned zip about them from said budget. So this plan, it's a bill before the House, Bill 5, that will give Cabinet the power to declare a special economic zone in the province, and then give Cabinet the power to exempt things in that zone from the requirements of provincial and local laws, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
And there's not in the bill, they're not constraining that at all. It can't exempt things from criminal laws, like a federal law. It can't exempt things from charter rights.
Yeah. They are not invoking the notwithstanding clause.
Yes.
So far in the text of the bill.
So far. Or with the bike lanes.
Yes.
But back to these. So there's been quite a back and forth. What are they going to do with this? Why do they want it? Why no restrictions on it? You've got Indigenous leaders who are concerned that even though it can't actually legally take away their right to be consulted, that will be the effect of it. Labor leaders, came out as far as saying this is going to usher in child labor within these zones, which I think may be probably stretching things a little bit beyond what would actually happen. But there has been a concern from actual lawyers with the CCLA that it could be used with some requirements of labor rights. That led to a giant back and forth. This week I finally got a statement from the Premier's office saying that they won't do that, and also that they can't, which I don't think seems to be clear in the language of the bill itself. So I bring this up because I think it's a really interesting bill. It could be potentially really impactful. It's one of those things like you make this decision now, and who knows what 3 governments down the road are going to do with this power. But we're not talking about it that much. So I bring it to the podcast where I think people care.
And I think there's an interesting interesting political issue here where I think the government does not want to start even carving out something as obvious as labor rights, even though this government, frankly, particularly when we talk about like blue-collar industrial unions, they've got reasonably good relations there, probably don't want to jeopardize those relations. But if they open the door to carving it out for labor law, then it's going to be, environmentalists asking, why aren't you protecting this? It will just become open season on this legislation, and they're just really hoping to get it passed through the legislature in its current clean, if I can use that language, its current clean form, and then they will try to reassure all these stakeholders, like, we're not going to use it that crazy way.
Press secretaries have been blowing up my phone since I got the story on the unions with the child labor comments. They'll be like, no, we don't, it's not for that. Where did they get that? Or no, we're not going to use it for that. But they haven't. Why didn't you say that when I asked you about it? Because there's a very careful way that they're dealing with this. But I do think it has a lot to do with their labor stakeholders.
Do I get to put a number on the table here?
Sure.
Okay. Do I get to sound like a broken record here? Do I get to say that I had this question again for the Minister of Finance for, I don't know, the 84th year in a row or something here? My number's 6.4, as in $6.4 billion. As in $6.4 billion that taxpayers are going to subsidize everybody in the payment of our electricity bills. And as I said to the Minister of Finance earlier on the agenda, he and I make six-figure salaries. Why am I getting a check from the government of Ontario to help me pay my hydro bill? And why is he? I don't understand it. I look at my hydro bill every, how often I get it, month I guess, and there's $8. $8 subsidy from the province of Ontario. I don't need the $8. He doesn't need the $8, and yet there it is. Anyway, it makes little sense to me, but there it is, and it was $5.9 billion last time. This problem's getting bigger and worse. So there it is. I'm getting off my, what do you call it again? What's that thing?
Soapbox.
Soapbox, thank you. I'm off my soapbox now. Okay, I asked him about booze as well. Why don't you do a little something on booze here?
Right, so this was a big focus of the provincial budget, but let's just go through the numbers here. LCBO revenue is set to decline significantly despite the liberalization of alcohol sales. In 2025-26, they expect to earn $1.85 billion, which is down substantially from what it had earned in the previous year. There's also losses in the taxes that the government imposes on beer, wine, and spirits. So we're losing money both ways. According to the province, there are several reasons for this. They are reducing the markup on alcohol sales and giving larger discounts to bars, restaurants, convenience stores, people who buy their alcohol from the LCBO. Also, there's currently no American booze on the shelves, which is limiting selection. And then we did have this funny moment in the technical briefing, and I swear I got permission to mention this. The deputy minister offered that some people just aren't drinking as much as they used to, and then he was hurried to add, not him, he's still drinking, he's doing his part for the finances of Ontario. But yes, many people are drinking less, and that is just having an obvious sort of mechanical effect, reducing alcohol revenues in the province.
You can see the newspaper headlines. Minister of Finance driving his deputy minister to drink. There we go. That's there.
Well, sorry, while we're talking about the tech brief, I have to mention your hobby horse, your soapbox. I mean, we don't get that many questions in the tech briefing. We only get 2 questions in the tech briefing.
Right.
And it's rare coinage, and you burned it to once again ask about the hydro subsidies. I respect the game.
and you know what? I'm going to keep doing it because to me it just doesn't. I don't know why by people. Anyway, I've said enough.
Kathleen Wynne is why, right? Because of everything that happened before she got kicked out of office in 2018, hydro bills were all people screamed about. I think they came into office, they wanted the issue to go away. They came up with the easiest, fastest solution, which was we're going to subsidize it, and then they don't want to open up that can of worms. It's got to be it, right?
Well, if the deficit is $14.6 billion, and you might actually be able to cut that in half just by not giving, I won't say you could cut the whole thing in half by not giving people who don't need the break a break. I mean, you could make some progress there, but anyway, okay. I know, you're sick to death of hearing me talk about it anyway. 232 pages, this budget. You got an example of it right there?
Physical copy here.
There it is.
It is.
Now, as these things go, bigger than normal, smaller than normal, what?
It is slightly thicker than last year's budget, but I think it is thin in two ways, right? I mean, it's certainly not the thickest budget you and I have ever covered, but it is really notable to me how little news there is in this budget. We just came out of an election, and I normally think that this is the moment where a government wants to present a big budget where they're going to spend the political capital that they earn on top of all the money they're going to spend, and there's some stuff in here. I don't want to pretend that it's not an important document. It spends $200 and some odd billion. Of course it's an important document. But it just, I don't know. I did not feel that there was a ton of meat in this budget.
You know what part of it is, and I mean, we've all seen enough budgets to know this. Back in the day, you really, really didn't find out what the province's plans were until budget day, and you got in the lockup and you read it. Mm-hmm. They've leaked their own budget for the last, many months in a row. A couple of weeks anyway, for sure.
Campaigned on lots of it.
On lots of it, yeah. So by the time you read the budget, there's really not much surprising that's in there. Chad, how much time we got left here? 2.5 minutes to go? That's enough time to talk about something that's in this budget that I, frankly, am surprised to see in a Ford Nation budget because it's so off-brand. The notion that cabinet ministers will be able to retain their honorifics, as in the Honourable John Michael McGrath, the Honourable JSC, for the rest of their lives after they leave politics. We have never done that in 158 years of life in the province of Ontario. What did you think when you saw it?
It reminded me of the King's Council, Queen's Council thing with lawyers. It's really nothing but a title, but it meant a lot to some people. Now, that ended up becoming controversial because they were picked through a kind of patronage manner, which wouldn't be the case, obviously, with this one. But that notion of, like, your title matters, and this matters to some people, and they're going to do it, reminded me of that.
And I thought the finance minister was very kind when we asked him, what is this doing in the budget? And he said, these are people, if you've served in cabinet, these are people who've done public service, and I want to honor the public service that they've done, whether they are in our party or in any other. And I thought that was a very nice move.
I guess we should put on the record as well, if you serve as a federal cabinet minister, you get to call yourself the Honourable whatever your name is for the rest of your life. Yes. That's been a practice that has happened federally. Obviously, the Prime Minister, etc., the Governor General, they are your honourable whatevers forever. But provincially, no. It's never been the case provincially. And there have been some pretty impressive people in the province of Ontario. Leslie Frost is one of them. Bill Davis was another one. John Robarts was another one. Who were pretty impressive people who went back to being Mr. Frost, Mr. Davis, Mr. Robarts after their political careers were over. But those days are gone, or soon to be gone anyway. Okay. Chad tells me he's out of fingers, and that means we're out of time. So that's the budget for this year. Jessica Smith-Cross, it's always a delight to have you at our table. Please come visit us one more time again. And don't forget to read her stuff in The Trillium, which is available at thetrillium.ca. There we go. That's pretty easy to find. And you and I, we should say, we're not going to be here tomorrow night because we're not going to do this all over again like we normally do on our Friday night things.
Yes.
So
we'll be here next week.
I'll see you in 8 days then, I guess.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, we'll do that then. Okay. All right. Do we sign off here? That's where we say, that's our onpoli podcast budget special for Thursday, May 15th, 2025.
You can follow our show on Apple Podcasts so you get notified each time a new episode is available. And you can see the video version of the podcast on the TVO Today YouTube channel.
We're always happy to hear your feedback on politics at tvo.org. That's it. Good night, everybody.